My name is Ethan Parker, 32 years old, and once upon a time, I was considered a piano prodigy. That was before my mother Diane crushed that part of me. For 15 years, I avoided touching a piano in public until my sister Natalie's wedding, when my mother thought she could humiliate me one last time. She positioned me as background music, in the corner, expecting me to fail. Instead, what happened that day changed everything between us forever. Before I tell you how my mother's plan to humiliate me backfired spectacularly, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up for yourself in front of family. I discovered my affinity for piano completely by accident when I was 7 years old. My father Thomas brought home an old upright piano he'd found at a garage sale. He thought it would be a nice decorative piece for our living room, maybe something Natalie might take interest in since she was showing artistic tendencies. The piano was slightly out of tune, with yellowed keys and a few missing ivory pieces, but to my young eyes, it was the most fascinating thing I'd ever seen. While my sister showed zero interest, I couldn't stay away from it. I'd wake up early before school just to press the keys, fascinated by how each one produced a different note. My mother initially found it annoying, constantly telling me to stop making that racket. But everything changed one afternoon when our neighbor Mrs. Jenkins came over for coffee. She was a retired music teacher, and when she heard me picking out the melody to Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, by ear after hearing it just once, she pulled my mother aside. "Diane, your son has perfect pitch. That's incredibly rare," she said. "He picked up that melody without any training. You should get him lessons." I remember the way my mother's expression shifted. It wasn't pride or happiness for me, it was recognition of an opportunity. Her eyes lit up in a way I'd become all too familiar with over the years. It was the look she got when she saw something she could mold, control, and ultimately use for her own validation. Within a week, I was enrolled in piano lessons with the strictest teacher in town, Mr. Abramson. He was a gray-haired man with perpetually pursed lips who rapped my knuckles with a ruler when I made mistakes. But despite his harsh methods, I flourished. The piano made sense to me in a way nothing else did. The mathematical precision of the notes combined with the emotional expressiveness created a language that spoke directly to my soul. My father was supportive in his quiet way. He'd listen to me practice, occasionally offering a thumbs up or a genuine, "That sounded great, buddy." He wasn't musically inclined himself, but he recognized my happiness when I played. My mother, on the other hand, became obsessed with my progress. She hovered over every practice session, timing me with a stopwatch, insisting I repeat passages until my fingers cramped. "You think that was good enough?" she'd say after I'd played a piece perfectly. "The Thompson boy won the regional competition last year. Are you playing better than him? Because second place might as well be last." By age 9, I was competing regularly. My natural ability combined with hours of forced practice made me stand out. I started winning local competitions, then regional ones. Each trophy was displayed prominently in our living room, my mother making sure to point them out to every visitor who entered our home. My sister Natalie, 3 years older, had been the center of attention before my talent emerged. She'd been doing well in school, was popular, and had shown promise in art. But suddenly, all eyes were on me. My mother stopped attending Natalie's art shows in favor of my recitals. Financial resources that might have gone to her art supplies were diverted to my piano lessons and competition fees. I could see the resentment growing in her eyes, but I was too young to understand it wasn't my fault. As my success grew, so did my mother's expectations and criticism. Nothing was ever good enough. If I won first place, she'd point out that my score wasn't perfect. If I received special commendation from judges, she'd focus on the one judge who hadn't been as effusive. She recorded all my performances, making me watch them afterward while she pointed out every minor flaw. "See that? Your posture slipped at measure 78. And there, your expression looked constipated during the allegro. Do you think Horowitz ever looked constipated when he played?" she'd say, pausing and replaying sections repeatedly until I felt nothing but shame about performances others had praised. The pivotal moment came when I was 12. I had qualified for the Northwestern Youth Classical Competition, the most prestigious in our part of the country. For months, my mother had pushed me harder than ever before. 4 hours of practice after school every day, 8 hours on weekends. I wasn't allowed to see friends or participate in any other activities. When my father suggested I take a day off because I looked exhausted, my mother flew into a rage. "Do you want him to be mediocre his whole life, Thomas? Is that what you want?" "Because that's how you raise a mediocre child," she had screamed. The day of the competition, I was a bundle of nerves. Backstage, while other parents were offering encouragement and support to their children, my mother was listing all the ways I could fail. "The Goldstein boy is playing the same piece. I heard him practice. His runs are cleaner than yours," she said. "Remember, the judges can see your face, so don't make those weird expressions you make when you hit the difficult passages." When my name was called, my legs felt like lead as I walked to the grand piano on stage. The lights were blinding, the audience a dark mass beyond them. I sat down, adjusted the bench, and placed my hands on the keys. And then, nothing. My mind went completely blank. The music I had practiced for months, the piece I could play in my sleep, had vanished from my memory. I sat there, frozen, for what felt like an eternity. From the audience, I heard my mother's voice cutting through the silence. "For God's sake, Ethan, play something!" Her voice broke the spell, but not in a helpful way. I began playing, but it was mechanical, disjointed. My fingers hit wrong notes. At one point, I completely lost my place and had to start a section over. When I finally finished, the applause was polite but sparse. I knew it had been a disaster. Backstage, away from other families but not quite privately enough, my mother unleashed her fury. "How could you embarrass me like that? Do you have any idea what I've sacrificed for you? The time? The money? And you just sit there like an idiot!" Her words cut deeper than any physical pain could have. "You're pathetic. All that talent wasted because you don't have the mental fortitude of a gnat." Several other competitors and their parents overheard. I saw the pitying looks, which somehow made everything worse. My father tried to intervene, but by then, the damage was done. Something broke inside me that day. The joy I had once found in music cracked and splintered under the weight of my mother's expectations and cruelty. Over the next 3 years, I went through the motions. I practiced because I had to, competed because it was expected, but the passion was gone. Each performance became an exercise in anxiety management rather than musical expression. I developed physical symptoms before performances: nausea, trembling hands, cold sweats. Finally, when I turned 15, after another disastrous competition where I nearly passed out from anxiety, I told my parents I was quitting piano. My father looked concerned but understanding. My mother looked as though I had slapped her. "You can't quit," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "This is what you do. This is who you are." "No," I replied, surprising myself with my firmness. "It's who you wanted me to be." The fallout was nuclear. She didn't speak to me for weeks. When she finally did, it was with a cold detachment that would characterize our relationship from that point forward. I became the great disappointment, the waste of potential, the son who had failed her. Little did she know, I hadn't really quit music. I had only quit performing it for her. Fast forward 17 years. I'm 32 now, working as a sound engineer at Wavelength Studios in Portland. It's a good job that keeps me connected to music, just from a safer distance. I record other musicians, mix their tracks, help them sound their best. It's fulfilling work, and I've built a reputation for understanding nuances in classical and piano compositions that other engineers miss. My relationship with my family remains complicated. I see my father occasionally for lunch when his construction business brings him to Portland. He's aged well, still strong from physical work, though his hair has gone completely gray. Our conversations are pleasant but superficial. We both carefully avoid mentioning my mother or my abandoned piano career. My sister Natalie and I exchanged birthday and Christmas texts, but not much else. She followed our mother's path in many ways. Became a real estate agent at the same company, lives just 20 minutes from our parents, and has adopted many of my mother's mannerisms and attitudes. I sometimes wonder if it was her way of finally getting the approval and attention I inadvertently stole during my piano years. As for my mother, we speak perhaps twice a year, strained conversations filled with passive-aggressive comments about my alternative lifestyle, working in music but not performing, and pointed questions about when I'll grow up and get a real job. I've learned to let her words wash over me without penetrating too deeply. Everything changed when I received a glossy invitation in the mail to Natalie's wedding. She was marrying Ryan Collins, son of property developer Maxwell Collins, whose company had transformed half of downtown. The invitation screamed money and status, thick cardstock, gold foil lettering, professional calligraphy. I knew immediately it had my mother's fingerprints all over it. Out of obligation and a small hope that perhaps time had healed some wounds, I RSVP'd yes. A week later, my mother called to confirm I was coming and to arrange a family dinner, to reconnect before the big day. The dinner was held at Castellano's, the most expensive restaurant in town. When I arrived, they were already seated, my father looking uncomfortable in a suit, my mother perfectly coiffed and manicured, Natalie and her fiancé Ryan sitting close together. Ryan seemed nice enough, handsome in a conventional way with his tailored suit and carefully styled brown hair. But there was something rehearsed about his smile that made me wonder if he was truly happy or just playing a part in someone else's production. "Ethan, you made it," my mother said as I approached, her tone suggesting she'd half expected me to bail. "You remember we mentioned business casual, right?" She glanced at my button-up shirt and dark jeans with thinly veiled disapproval. "It's good to see you, son," my father said, standing to give me a brief hug. I noticed he'd lost weight since I'd last seen him. Natalie offered a tight smile. "Ethan, thanks for coming." She looked like a clone of our mother, same highlighted hair, same calculated expressions, same way of examining everyone as if assessing their value. The only difference was that Natalie seemed to be trying too hard, whereas my mother's behavior was effortlessly natural. Dinner was a minefield of uncomfortable conversation. My mother dominated the table, talking endlessly about the wedding plans, the guest list full of important people, and how everything had to be absolute perfection. "Maxwell and Catherine Collins are used to the very best," she said, referring to Ryan's parents. "This wedding is going to put us on the map socially." I picked at my overpriced steak while she talked. Ryan occasionally nodded and smiled, rarely speaking unless directly addressed. I caught my father's eye at one point, and the resigned weariness I saw there made my heart ache. "So, Ethan," my mother said during a brief lull, "Natalie tells me you're still doing that recording studio thing." "I'm a sound engineer, yes," I replied. She took a deliberate sip of wine. "I ran into Leslie Abernathy at the club last week. Her son Jonathan is a doctor now. Neurosurgeon. And he still finds time to play piano at charity events." There it was, the comparison, the reminder of my failure, the implication that I had wasted my potential. "That's nice," I said neutrally. "He studied at Juilliard, you know. Where you could have gone if you'd stuck with it." She placed her fork down with precision. "Such a shame to throw away that level of talent." "Mom," Natalie interjected, "we were talking about the wedding." "Of course, darling." My mother instantly shifted gears. "Now about the music." "The string quartet is confirmed, but we're still having trouble with the pianist for the reception. The one I wanted is booked, and the alternatives are either mediocre or charging absurd amounts." I saw something pass between my mother and sister, a look that set off warning bells in my mind. "It's so frustrating," Natalie continued, picking up the conversation too smoothly. "We really wanted elegant background music during the dinner portion, something classical but not too distracting. My father suddenly became very interested in his water glass, avoiding eye contact with everyone. It's too bad, really," my mother added, her voice casual but her eyes sharp as they fixed on me. Having someone with classical training in the family, but… She let the sentence hang unfinished. And there it was. The trap being laid, the guilt being applied, the manipulation beginning. I could feel it as clearly as a change in air pressure before a storm. "I don't perform anymore," I said quietly. "You know that." "Oh, I know," my mother replied quickly. "I wouldn't expect you to. It's been, 17 years? I imagine those skills have completely deteriorated by now. We need someone professional anyway. This isn't a school recital." The deliberate provocation was so transparent I almost laughed. Ryan looked uncomfortable, glancing between us with growing awareness that he was witnessing family dysfunction in real time. "Your mother just means it's a shame." My father finally spoke up, his tone placating. "But we understand, Ethan. No one's asking you to play." But I could see in my mother's eyes that's exactly what she was doing, asking without asking, challenging me, daring me to refuse so she could add it to her mental ledger of my failures. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of wedding talk and thinly veiled barbs. As we waited for the valet to bring our cars, my mother managed to isolate me for a moment. "Think about it, Ethan," she said quietly. "It would mean a lot to your sister. Unless, of course, you're still not good enough. Then by all means, don't embarrass yourself." She patted my arm with false affection. "We'll understand." As I drove back to my apartment that night, I could feel something shifting inside me. The old familiar anxiety was there, but underneath it was something else, a slow burning anger I had suppressed for years. I found myself wondering what would happen if, just once, I didn't play by her rules. What my family didn't know was that music had never truly left my life. When I quit public performance, I didn't quit piano. In the privacy of my apartment, I played almost daily on a digital piano with headphones. Working at the studio had connected me with musicians who played for love rather than acclaim, who had helped me rediscover joy in music without the pressure of perfection. In some ways, I was a better pianist now than I'd ever been during my competition days. More expressive, more connected to the emotional core of the music. But performing in public, especially for my mother? The thought alone made my palms sweat. 3 months before the wedding, on a Tuesday evening while I was mixing tracks for a local indie band, my phone lit up with my mother's name. I stared at it for several rings, debating whether to answer, before finally picking up. "Ethan, darling," she began, her voice honey-sweet, always a warning sign. "I hope I'm not disturbing your little hobby." "I'm at work, Mom," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "What can I do for you?" "Well, I've been thinking about the wedding. You know how important this day is for your sister. For all of us, really." She paused, waiting for acknowledgement. "Yes, I know. The thing is, we've run into a bit of a situation with the music. The pianist we'd booked has cancelled, some nonsense about a European tour. All the good replacements are taken, and the ones available are charging absurd amounts." She sighed dramatically. "Your sister is just devastated." I could see where this was heading but remained silent, forcing her to actually ask. "So I was thinking," she continued when I didn't respond, "wouldn't it be a meaningful gesture if you played for the reception? Just some simple background pieces during dinner. Nothing complicated or showy. Just background music." The dismissive way she said background music made it clear exactly what she thought of my abilities now. In her mind, I wasn't good enough for anything more prominent. "I don't perform anymore," I said, the same words I'd used at dinner. "Oh, Ethan, don't be so dramatic. It's hardly a performance. No one will really be listening. It's just to create ambience." Her voice hardened slightly. "Unless you truly can't play at even that level anymore. It's not about ability, Mom. It's about..." "About what?" "Your sister has supported you through all your choices. The least you could do is help make her special date perfect." The guilt trip was expertly deployed. Family supports family, Ethan. Or have you forgotten that concept since you moved away? I pinched the bridge of my nose, feeling a headache forming. Let me think about it. What's there to think about? It's a simple yes or no. But I suppose if you need time to see if you can still play at a basic level. I said I'll think about it. I repeated more firmly. Fine. But Natalie needs to know soon. The wedding is only 3 months away. She paused. Your father and I were just saying how nice it would be to see you be part of the family again, even in this small way. After she hung up, I sat motionless in the studio, the mixing board untouched in front of me. The manipulation was so obvious it was almost comical. She was using every tool in her arsenal: guilt, family obligation, subtle digs at my ability, implications that I had abandoned them rather than the other way around. Later that evening, Natalie called. Her approach was different but no less manipulative. Ethan, Mom told me she spoke with you, she began, her voice soft and conciliatory. I know things haven't always been great between us, but this would really mean a lot to me. Would it? I asked. Or would it mean a lot to Mom? She hesitated just a fraction too long. To both of us. Look, I know Mom can be intense, but she's trying in her way. And this would be special, having my brother be part of my day. As background music, I said flatly. That's not what I meant. But I could hear the insincerity. Anyway, think about it, okay? For me? My father called the next day during his lunch break. Son, I'm not going to pressure you, he said, his voice tired. But you know how your mother gets when she has her mind set on something. Maybe it would be easier just to do it and get it over with. Is that your approach to life with her, Dad? Just do what she wants to keep the peace. The silence on the other end was answer enough. I'm sorry, I said, immediately regretting my harshness. That wasn't fair. No, it was fair, he replied quietly. Maybe too fair. Just consider it. If not for her, then for yourself. Maybe it's time to face that particular demon. That comment stuck with me. Was I still letting my mother control me by allowing my fear of performing to dictate my choices? Was refusing actually giving her continued power over my relationship with music? I called my friend Jason that night. We'd met in college and had remained close, one of the few people who knew the full story of my childhood and relationship with my mother. She's manipulating you, he said bluntly after I explained the situation. Classic narcissist move. She's setting you up to fail so she can say I told you so about you quitting piano. You think? I know. Look, if you want to play at the wedding because you want to reclaim performing on your terms, do it. But if you're doing it because of guilt or obligation, don't. She'll find a way to make it painful either way. I spent a week mulling it over, my thoughts circling like vultures. During a late-night session at the studio, I found myself alone with a baby grand piano in the recording room. Without conscious decision, I sat down and began to play Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, a piece I'd performed at my last competition before quitting. My fingers remembered. More than remembered, they expressed the music with a maturity and emotional depth I hadn't possessed as a teenager. As the final notes faded, I realized I was crying, not from sadness but from the pure catharsis of reconnecting with that part of myself without fear or pressure. The next morning, I called my mother. I'll do it, I said without preamble when she answered. You'll. Oh. The wedding. Well, that's good of you to step up. She recovered quickly. Natalie will be pleased. Nothing too complicated, remember. Classical, tasteful, background pieces. I know what to play at a wedding, Mom. Of course you do, she said in a tone that suggested the opposite. We'll have a list of approved pieces for you. And Ethan? Thank you for not letting your sister down. Again. I hung up before I could respond with something I'd regret. Then I walked to my piano and began to practice in earnest, not the simple background music my mother expected, but challenging pieces that would test my abilities and rebuild my confidence. If I was going to do this, I would do it on my terms. What had begun as another manipulative victory for my mother was transforming into something else entirely, a chance to reclaim a part of myself I'd allowed her to take from me long ago. 2 days before the wedding, I arrived at Rosemont Estate, the upscale venue my mother had selected for Natalie's perfect day. The main house was a restored Victorian mansion set on 20 acres of manicured gardens, with a separate ballroom and reception area that could accommodate the 300 guests my mother had invited, most of whom, I suspected, were business connections and social climbers rather than actual friends. My mother greeted me in the grand foyer, clipboard in hand, directing staff with military precision. She air-kissed my cheek, her perfume expensively overwhelming. "Ethan, finally? We've been setting up since yesterday." Her eyes quickly assessed me, lingering disapprovingly on my casual travel clothes. "Your room is in the East Wing, second floor. The rehearsal dinner is at 6. Don't be late." "No. How was your trip?" Or, "Good to see you." Just instructions and implicit criticism. "Where's the piano I'll be using?" I asked. "Oh, we've set up a smaller one in the corner of the reception area. For the background music." She emphasized those two words again. "The string quartet will be on the main stage for the important pieces." I followed a staff member to my room, unpacked quickly, then went in search of this smaller piano. What I found made my heart sink. It was an old upright that had clearly been selected for its appearance rather than its sound, painted white to match the wedding decor but poorly maintained. Several keys stuck when I tested them, and it was badly out of tune. "Is there a problem?" My mother's voice came from behind me. "This piano is in terrible condition," I said, pressing a key that produced a sour, tinny sound. She waved a dismissive hand. "It looks perfect with the decor. Besides, it's just for background ambience during dinner. No one will really be listening to the notes." "I'll be listening to the notes," I replied. "And anyone with even a passing familiarity with music will notice it's out of tune." "Fine," she sighed dramatically. "I'll have someone look at it tomorrow. Though I don't see why you're making such a fuss. It's not like this is Carnegie Hall." She checked her watch. "I need to speak with the florist. Try not to cause any more problems." As she walked away, I sat at the piano, testing its range and wincing at its limitations. Even tuned, it would be a challenge to produce anything beautiful on this instrument. I couldn't help wondering if that had been deliberate, another way to ensure I couldn't shine. Later that afternoon, I overheard my mother talking to Stephanie, the wedding planner, just outside the reception area. "We've positioned the piano in that alcove there," my mother was saying. "It's visible enough to show we have live music but not prominent enough to distract from the bride and groom." "And your son is playing?" Stephanie asked. "Yes, well, he used to play when he was younger. He's not very good anymore, but it's a family obligation thing. You know how it is." Her laugh was brittle. "Just make sure the professional musicians for the dance portion are ready to step in by 8. Ethan will be done by then." I stepped back around the corner, a familiar hollowness expanding in my chest. After all these years, nothing had changed. She was still determined to diminish me, to ensure everyone knew I was a disappointment, obligation to be tolerated rather than appreciated. That evening at the rehearsal dinner, I was seated at the far end of the family table, next to distant cousins I barely remembered. The seating arrangement spoke volumes about my place in the family hierarchy. Ryan's parents, the wealthy and influential Collins couple, sat near my mother, who was practically glowing with social validation. When family photos were being taken, I stood waiting my turn, only to have the photographer announce they were finished after shots of Natalie with our parents, Natalie with Ryan's family, and various combinations that somehow never included me. "Oh, Ethan, did you want to be in the photos?" my mother asked with feigned surprise when she noticed me standing there. "We've already done the immediate family ones. Maybe tomorrow at the actual wedding." I just nodded and walked away, heading outside to the garden terrace for some air. The humiliations were so predictable they had almost lost their sting. Almost. Later that night, unable to sleep, I slipped down to the reception area. The staff had finished setting up, and the room was eerily beautiful in the moonlight streaming through the tall windows. I sat at the white piano, relieved to find someone had at least made an attempt to tune it, though it was still far from ideal. I began to play softly, not the simple classical pieces my mother expected, but Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, complex, emotional, technically demanding. I lost myself in the music, my fingers finding their way through the familiar landscape of notes and emotions. That's quite something. I stopped abruptly, startled by the voice. An elderly man stood in the doorway, leaning on a cane. He was dressed formally despite the late hour, his white hair neatly combed. "I'm sorry," I said. "I didn't mean to disturb anyone." "Disturb? Young man, that was the most beautiful thing I've heard in months." He walked closer, his movements slow but deliberate. "William Wilson. I'm a friend of the Collins family. Ethan Parker. The bride's brother." His eyebrows rose. "You're Diane's son? The one playing tomorrow?" I nodded, wondering what my mother had told him about me. Interesting. He sat in a chair near the piano. "I was under the impression the pianist tomorrow was some amateur playing simple background tunes. That was Rachmaninoff you were playing, wasn't it?" "Not exactly background music. It's complicated," I said. "Family usually is." He smiled knowingly. "I was a concert pianist in my younger days. Performed with the Chicago Symphony for nearly 20 years. "Really?" I perked up with genuine interest. "That's incredible. It was a different world back then." His eyes grew distant with memory. "But I still recognize exceptional talent when I hear it. You play with remarkable emotional intelligence." We talked for nearly an hour, discussing music technique, the great composers. It was the most honest conversation I'd had since arriving. When I mentioned my history with performance anxiety, he nodded understanding. "The pressure can be crushing, especially when it comes from those who should be supporting you," he said. "But remember, when you play, it's between you and the music. No one else." As I finally headed back to my room, Mr. Wilson called after me. "Young man, what will you be playing tomorrow?" I hesitated. "My mother wants simple classical pieces. Unobtrusive background music." "And what do you want to play?" The question caught me off guard. What did I want? For years I'd either played what my mother demanded or not played at all. "I'm not sure anymore," I admitted. "Well, when you figure it out, play that." He tapped his cane for emphasis. Music should never be unobtrusive. It should move people. Even at weddings. Especially at weddings. The morning of the wedding, I woke with a strange sense of calm. Mr. Wilson's words had resonated with me throughout the night. When I played, it was between me and the music. No one else. But that resolve was tested when my mother cornered me after breakfast, thrusting a folder into my hands. "Here's the music for today," she said. "I've selected appropriate pieces. Nothing too complex or distracting." She fixed me with a stern look. "Ethan, I know we've had our differences, but today is Natalie's day. Please try not to embarrass us." I opened the folder to find simplified arrangements of classical pieces, watered-down versions of Beethoven and Mozart that any first-year piano student could play. The message was clear: she didn't trust my abilities, and she was determined to ensure I remained firmly in the background. "Is this really necessary?" I asked, holding up the simplified sheet music. "I'm just making sure everything goes smoothly," she replied. "It's been a long time since you've performed. These should be manageable for you." Before I could respond, she was called away by the wedding planner. I stood there holding the folder, feeling that familiar mix of anger and helplessness. But this time, something was different. This time, the anger was winning. The ceremony itself was a precisely orchestrated display of wealth and status, exactly as my mother had planned. Natalie looked beautiful in her designer gown, though her smile seemed rehearsed, her eyes constantly darting to our mother for approval. Ryan appeared genuinely happy, if somewhat overwhelmed by the spectacle surrounding what should have been a personal commitment. Throughout the ceremony, I remained a peripheral figure, seated in the second row rather than with the immediate family in the first. My father caught my eye at one point, offering a small smile of solidarity, but he too seemed reduced to a prop in my mother's production. After the vows, photographs, and cocktail hour, guests began moving toward the reception area. My mother intercepted me as I made my way to the piano. "Remember, just the pieces I gave you," she instructed. "Start when people are seated and play softly. No one should even notice the music." She straightened my tie with unnecessary force. "Just be background music, Ethan. That's all we need from you today." Those words echoed in my head as I took my seat at the white piano, positioned in the corner as promised, half hidden by an elaborate floral arrangement. From this angle, I could see the entire room but remained largely invisible to the guests, exactly as my mother wanted. I placed the folder of simplified arrangements on the piano, opened it, and stared at the notes. Simple, uninspiring, safe. Background music. Just as I'd been background in my family since I'd failed to be the prodigy my mother wanted. The room filled gradually, guests finding their assigned tables, servers pouring wine and water. My mother was in her element, moving gracefully between important guests, accepting compliments on the beautiful wedding. Natalie and Ryan sat at the head table, surrounded by their wedding party. I began to play the first piece from the folder, a simplified version of Beethoven's Für Elise, that removed all the complexity and emotion that made the original compelling. My fingers moved mechanically over the keys, producing technically correct but soulless music that blended into the background exactly as my mother intended. As I played, memories cascaded through my mind: the competitions, the criticism, the crushing pressure, the public humiliation when I froze on stage. But also the joy I'd once found in music before it became entangled with my mother's expectations, the pure expression I'd rediscovered playing alone in my apartment, the conversation with Mr. Wilson just last night. "When you play, it's between you and the music. No one else." I finished Für Elise, and smoothly transitioned into the next piece in the folder, another watered-down classical arrangement. From across the room, my mother caught my eye and gave an approving nod. I was following instructions. Being the good, compliant son. Staying safely in the background. And something inside me rebelled. Mid-phrase, my hands paused over the keys. In that moment of silence, I made my decision. I closed the folder of simplified arrangements and set it aside. I took a deep breath, positioned my hands, and began to play Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. The rich, complex opening chords filled the room, so different from the bland background music that had preceded them that several nearby guests turned in surprise. I lost myself in the music, in the technical challenges and emotional depth that had drawn me to this piece years ago. My fingers flew across the keys with a confidence I hadn't felt in 17 years, drawing sounds from the mediocre piano that I hadn't thought possible. I didn't look up, didn't need to see my mother's reaction. I could feel it. Her shock, then anger, then panic as the room gradually fell silent, conversations dying away as more and more guests turned toward the corner where I played. No longer background music but the focal point of the room. When I finally allowed myself to glance up, the transformation was visible. Guests had stopped eating, stopped talking, many had even put down their forks to listen. My father's face showed astonishment, then a slow-building pride that brought tears to my eyes. Natalie had paused mid-conversation with Ryan, her carefully composed bridal mask slipping to reveal genuine surprise. And my mother, her face had drained of color, her smile frozen in a rictus of social panic as she realized she'd lost control of the narrative. In the back of the room, I spotted Mr. Wilson, nodding in approval, a knowing smile on his face. I played the full movement, every note, every run, every emotional crescendo. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of complete silence. Then the room erupted in applause. Genuine, enthusiastic applause, not the polite acknowledgement given to background musicians but the kind reserved for performances that move people. As guests returned to their conversations, now buzzing with comments about the unexpected music, my mother made her way toward me, maintaining her social smile but with fury in her eyes. "What do you think you're doing?" she hissed under her breath. "That was not what we agreed on." "No, it wasn't what you dictated," I replied calmly. I decided to play real music instead. You're trying to steal attention from your sister's day. It's selfish and inappropriate. Is it? I gestured toward Natalie, who was accepting compliments from guests about her talented brother. She seems to be enjoying the positive attention her family is receiving. Before my mother could respond, an older gentleman approached us. He introduced himself as Professor Lawrence from the State Conservatory of Music. That was extraordinary, he said, extending his hand to me. I haven't heard that piece played with such emotional intelligence in years. Do you perform regularly? My mother instantly shifted personas, her anger vanishing behind a proud parent mask. Ethan was quite the prodigy when he was younger, she said, placing a proprietary hand on my shoulder. I always encouraged his talent. Professor Lawrence looked skeptical but polite. Well, you clearly have exceptional ability, he said directly to me. If you're interested, I'd love to talk about some opportunities at the conservatory. We have an adult program for exceptional talents. He handed me his card before moving away, leaving my mother staring after him with a complex mix of emotions on her face, the strongest being calculation. I could almost see her recalibrating, trying to determine if my musical ability might once again have value to her social standing. Well, she said finally, perhaps you've retained more skill than I realized. Though it was still inappropriate to play something so attention-grabbing. She walked away to continue her hosting duties, but something had shifted. I continued to play throughout dinner, choosing pieces that were beautiful and moving without being ostentatious. Debussy's Clair de Lune, Chopin's Nocturnes, pieces that demonstrated technical skill and emotional depth while still appropriate for a wedding reception. Guests continued to comment and compliment, several coming to the piano between courses to make requests or express appreciation. Each positive interaction was a small victory, a reclaiming of my musical identity separate from my mother's narrative. Late in the evening, as the professional band was setting up for the dancing portion, Natalie approached the piano during a brief pause in my playing. I didn't know you could still play like that, she said, an unfamiliar sincerity in her voice. It was beautiful, Ethan. Thank you, I replied, surprised by her genuine compliment. Mom always said you'd completely lost your abilities when you quit. She glanced across the room to where our mother was chatting with Ryan's parents. I guess that wasn't true. There are a lot of things Mom says that aren't entirely true, I said carefully. Natalie nodded slowly, something shifting behind her eyes. I'm starting to realize that. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years.
After the band took over and the dancing began, I slipped outside for some air, emotionally drained but exhilarated. The garden terrace was quiet, fairy lights twinkling in the trees, the music from inside muffled to a distant pulse. I wasn't alone for long. My mother's voice cut through the peaceful night. We need to talk about what happened in there. She stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the light from inside. Even in shadow, I could see she was rigid with controlled anger. What exactly did happen, Mom? I asked, too emotionally spent to be diplomatic. You know exactly what you did. You deliberately upstaged your sister at her own wedding. She stepped onto the terrace, her movements precise and controlled. After all these years, you're still the selfish little boy who needs to be the center of attention. I laughed, a short, incredulous sound. That's your take? That I was being selfish by playing beautiful music that everyone enjoyed? Don't twist this around. You were supposed to play simple background pieces. Instead, you turned it into a concert about you. It wasn't about me. It was about the music. Music that moved people. It was about defying me, she snapped, finally losing her composure. You saw those simplified arrangements and deliberately chose to embarrass me by playing something I specifically told you not to. And there it was, the real issue. Not that I'd upstaged Natalie, but that I'd defied my mother. Challenged her control. Tell me something, I said, suddenly tired of the decades-long dance we'd been doing. Why did you really want me to play at the wedding? It wasn't to save money on a pianist. It wasn't for Natalie. What was it really about? She faltered, just for a moment. I told you. Family obligation. Having you participate. No, I interrupted. The truth, Mom. For once. She stared at me, her face hardening. Fine. I thought it would be fitting for everyone to see what became of my once talented son. The great disappointment. The boy who had everything and threw it away because he didn't have the backbone to handle pressure. The words should have hurt, but instead, they were almost a relief, the truth finally spoken aloud after years of subtext and passive aggression. Except it backfired, I said quietly. Because it turns out I didn't throw anything away. I just took it back from you. What is that supposed to mean? It means I never stopped playing, Mom. I only stopped performing for your approval. I still love music. I'm still good at it. I just had to get away from you to remember that. Her face flushed with anger. How dare you speak to me that way? After everything I sacrificed for you? The lessons, the competitions, the time. The sacrifices were never for me, I replied. They were investments in your own ego. You didn't want me to succeed for my sake. You wanted me to succeed so you could take credit. That's absurd. I was pushing you to excellence. You were crushing me. My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. Do you have any idea what it does to a child to be told constantly that they're not good enough? To have every achievement dismissed and every mistake magnified? To be humiliated in public when they fail to be perfect? I was preparing you for the real world. No, you were taking out your own frustrations on a child. Using me to fulfill whatever ambitions you couldn't achieve yourself. She raised her hand as if to slap me, then caught herself, dropping it to her side. You ungrateful. Diane, stop. My father stood in the doorway, his face grim. I hadn't seen him approach, had no idea how much he'd heard. Stay out of this, Thomas, my mother said without looking at him. This is between me and Ethan. No, it's not. It never has been. My father's voice was quiet but firmer than I'd ever heard it. I've stayed silent too long, letting you bulldoze our son because it was easier than standing up to you. Not anymore. My mother turned to him, clearly shocked by his intervention. You're taking his side? After he deliberately ruined Natalie's wedding? Ruined? My father laughed incredulously. Diane, have you been in the same reception I have? People are raving about the music. Natalie's delighted with the compliments she's getting about her talented brother. The only person who thinks anything was ruined is you, because for once, you couldn't control everything and everyone. I stood frozen, watching this unprecedented rebellion from my father. You don't understand, my mother insisted, her voice rising. He was supposed to fail, I finished for her. I was supposed to play mediocre music that would confirm your narrative that I'm a disappointment. That I wasted my potential. That you were right all along. That's ridiculous, she sputtered, but her eyes darted away, unable to meet mine. It's the truth, my father said quietly. And it's time we all stopped pretending. Movement in the doorway caught my attention. Natalie stood there, Ryan slightly behind her, both clearly uncomfortable at stumbling into the family confrontation. What's going on? Natalie asked, looking between the three of us. Nothing, darling, my mother said quickly, attempting to regain composure. Just a small family discussion. Nothing for you to worry about on your special day. It didn't sound small, Natalie replied, stepping onto the terrace. I heard shouting. Your brother is upset because I called him out on his selfish behavior during the reception, my mother said, crafting the narrative in real time. To my surprise, Natalie frowned. What selfish behavior? His music was beautiful. Everyone loved it. My mother faltered, not expecting resistance from her typically compliant daughter. It was inappropriate. He was showing off, trying to be the center of attention. That's not how it seemed to me, Ryan spoke up unexpectedly. The music added something special to the reception. Several of my family members commented on it. My mother looked between them, visibly recalculating. Well, of course, if you enjoyed it, that's what matters. I was only concerned that it might have overshadowed. Mom, stop. Natalie's voice was tired. Just stop manipulating for once. This is exhausting. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother stared at Natalie as if she'd never seen her before. I've spent my entire life trying to meet your impossible standards, Natalie continued, gaining confidence. Watching what you did to Ethan, then trying to be the perfect daughter so you wouldn't do the same to me. I'm tired of it. My sister and I exchanged a look of surprised understanding, two people recognizing a shared experience they'd never discussed. I think, my father said into the silence, that we all need some space to process. Diane, perhaps we should go back inside. There are still guests who need attention. The mention of social obligations triggered my mother's autopilot. She straightened, composed her features, and nodded stiffly. Of course. We can discuss this inappropriate behavior later, in private. As she turned to go, I called after her. There won't be a later discussion, Mom. I'm done letting you define me or my music. She paused but didn't turn back, then continued inside with my father following after giving me a small nod of support. Natalie lingered, an awkward silence falling between us. I didn't realize, she finally said, how bad it was for you growing up. I was so caught up in my own jealousy about the attention you got, I never saw what that attention was actually doing to you. I didn't realize how it affected you either, I admitted. I thought you were the favorite, the one who could do no wrong. I was the acceptable substitute when you didn't work out as planned. Her laugh was hollow. Not exactly a recipe for healthy development. Ryan squeezed her hand supportively. Maybe this is a conversation for another time? When you're both not emotionally drained from the wedding? Natalie nodded, then surprised me by stepping forward to give me a quick hug. Your music really was beautiful, Ethan. Thank you for being here today, despite everything. After they returned to their guests, I remained on the terrace, processing what had just happened. For the first time in my adult life, I'd stood up to my mother's manipulation and narrative control. More surprisingly, I hadn't been alone. My father, and even Natalie, had recognized the toxic dynamic and spoken up. Something fundamental had shifted in our family, and while I knew there would be fallout to deal with, I felt lighter than I had in years. The next morning, as I was checking out of the venue, my phone pinged with a text from Natalie. Thank you for the music yesterday. And for having the courage I never did. Maybe when we get back from the honeymoon, we could talk? Really talk. It was a small olive branch, but it felt like the beginning of something new.
6 months after the wedding, I stood in the wings of Westfield Auditorium at the State Conservatory of Music, waiting to perform in my first public recital since childhood. Professor Lawrence, true to his word at the wedding, had helped me enroll in the conservatory's advanced adult program, where I'd been studying and practicing formally for the past few months. The journey to this moment had been complicated. In the days following the wedding confrontation, my mother had alternated between cold silence and attempts to rewrite what had happened, insisting she'd always supported my music and had been misunderstood in the heat of the moment. When those tactics failed to pull me back into our old dynamic, she tried guilt, anger, and finally dismissal, telling relatives and friends that I was going through another rebellious phase that would pass. What she hadn't anticipated was that the dynamic in our family had fundamentally changed. My father, emboldened by his stand at the wedding, had continued to assert himself. 3 months after the wedding, he had moved out of the family home and into an apartment of his own, not divorcing my mother but creating healthy distance and boundaries for the first time in their marriage. I enabled her treatment of you for too long, he told me over lunch one day. I convinced myself I was keeping the peace, but really, I was just being a coward. I can't undo that, Ethan, but I can make sure I don't keep making the same mistake. Our relationship had strengthened as we both worked to heal from the dynamics that had damaged us. He'd come to several of my practice performances at the conservatory, his genuine pride and support a balm to old wounds. Natalie and Ryan had returned from their honeymoon to face the aftermath of the wedding confrontation. To my surprise, Natalie had called me, suggesting we meet for coffee without our parents. That first conversation had been awkward, filled with hesitations and old defenses, but also moments of genuine connection as we compared notes on growing up under our mother's manipulative influence. "I was so jealous of you," she admitted during our second meeting. "All that attention she gave you, I didn't see it for what it was. By the time I realized it was toxic, I'd already become what she wanted. The perfect, compliant daughter. And I was jealous of you," I confessed. "The way she approved of you, praised you to others. I thought you had it easy. We were both damaged, just in different ways." She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "Ryan sees it so clearly because he's outside the family. He's been encouraging me to get therapy, to understand why I keep seeking Mom's approval even when it makes me miserable." Those conversations had begun a tentative rebuilding of our sibling relationship, not close yet, but honest in a way it had never been before. As for my mother, I'd established clear boundaries. I returned her manipulative texts and calls with brief, factual responses, refusing to be drawn into emotional games or guilt trips. When she realized her usual tactics no longer worked, she'd shifted to presenting herself to others as the supportive mother of a talented musician, attempting to take credit for my return to music, while privately seething at her loss of control. Mr. Wilson, the elderly former concert pianist I'd met at the wedding, had become an unexpected mentor and friend. At 83, he still played beautifully, and his insights into both music and life had been invaluable as I navigated my new path. "Your mother used your talent to fill her own emotional needs," he told me during one of our regular coffee meetings. "That's not uncommon, but it's always damaging. Music should be about expression, connection, joy, not validation or control." Now, standing in the wings waiting to perform, I felt the familiar flutter of anxiety. But it was different this time. Normal performance nerves rather than the crushing weight of potential failure and humiliation I'd associated with performing as a child. From my vantage point, I could see the audience filing in. My father was already seated, chatting amiably with Mr. Wilson. Natalie and Ryan had promised to come, though I hadn't spotted them yet. My mother had not been invited, a boundary I'd set clearly and without apology. Professor Lawrence approached, breaking my reverie. "Ready, Ethan? You're on in 5 minutes." I nodded, taking deep breaths to center myself. "As ready as I'll ever be. Remember what we've discussed. This performance isn't about being perfect. It's about connecting with the music and sharing that connection with the audience." He squeezed my shoulder supportively. "Your technical skills are exceptional, but it's your emotional intelligence that makes your playing special. Trust that." As I walked onto the stage a few minutes later, the applause was warm and welcoming. I spotted Natalie and Ryan slipping into seats near the back, Natalie giving me a small wave and thumbs up. My father sat straighter in his seat, his face a mixture of pride and nervous excitement on my behalf. I settled at the grand piano, adjusting the bench, taking a moment to ground myself. Then I began to play Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, the same piece I'd played at the wedding, the piece that had helped me reclaim my relationship with music. As I played, memories surfaced, the little boy discovering piano for the first time, the competitions, the crushing pressure, the years of avoidance, and finally, the wedding performance that had broken the cycle. But unlike before, these memories no longer carried their emotional charge. They were simply parts of my story, steps on the path that had led me here. When the final notes faded, the applause was immediate and enthusiastic. As I stood to take my bow, I caught sight of my father wiping tears from his eyes, Mr. Wilson nodding approvingly, and Natalie clapping with genuine appreciation. After the recital, as I greeted well-wishers in the lobby, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from my mother. "I saw your performance was tonight. I'm sure it went well. Perhaps next time you'll remember to invite family who have supported your talent from the beginning. 6 months ago, that message would have sent me into a spiral of guilt and doubt. Now, I simply put the phone away, returning my attention to the real connections surrounding me. My father's proud embrace, Natalie's genuine compliments, Mr. Wilson's knowing smile. Later that week, I began teaching piano to a small group of children with performance anxiety, using my own experiences to help them find joy in music without the pressure of perfection. Watching their faces light up when they played something beautiful, seeing them learn to appreciate progress rather than demand perfection, it healed something in me I hadn't even realized was still broken. The wedding video had unexpectedly gone viral when one of the guests posted a clip of my performance online with the caption, "Wedding pianist stuns guests with surprise Rachmaninoff." The comments were overwhelmingly positive, many from people who connected with the emotional depth of the performance. I'd received several requests to play at other events, which I considered carefully, accepting only those that felt right. One evening, as I practiced in my apartment, my phone rang with my mother's number. 6 months earlier, I might have ignored it or answered with trepidation. Now I answered calmly. "Hello, Mom." "Ethan," she began, her voice overly pleasant. "I was just calling to let you know the Henderson's daughter is getting married next month. They specifically asked if you might be available to play. Apparently they saw that video from Natalie's wedding. I told them you'd be delighted." The old pattern, making commitments on my behalf, controlling my talent, inserting herself as the gatekeeper of my abilities. But I was no longer playing that role. "If they'd like me to consider playing, they should contact me directly," I replied evenly. "I'll need to check my schedule and discuss details with them personally. But I already told them. That wasn't your place, Mom. My music, my decisions." My tone was firm but not unkind. "If you'd like to give them my contact information, that's fine. Otherwise, I'll need to end this call. I'm in the middle of practicing." The silence on the other end spoke volumes. Finally, she said, "You've changed," with a mixture of accusation and something that might have been grudging respect. "Yes," I agreed simply. "I have." After we hung up, I returned to the piano, playing not for an imagined audience or critical judge, but for the pure joy of creating something beautiful. The wedding had been a turning point, the moment I reclaimed not just my music but myself. In standing up to my mother's attempt to humiliate me, I had broken free of the narrative she'd constructed around my talent and worth. Music had once been a source of anxiety and pain. Now it was a source of healing, connection, and joy, not just for me, but for the students I taught and the audiences I played for. The journey wasn't over, and there would be more difficult conversations and boundaries to maintain, but for the first time in decades, I was playing my own composition rather than following someone else's score. I finished my practice session with Debussy's Clair de Lune, letting the gentle, luminous notes fill my apartment. As the final chord faded into silence, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for most of my life. The peace that comes from finding your authentic voice and having the courage to let it be heard. What about you? Have you ever had to stand up to family expectations to reclaim your own path? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of overcoming family dynamics. And if you know someone who might need to hear this message of reclaiming their passion, share this video with them. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your talents belong to you, not to those who would use them for their own validation.